Welcome to the Comic Sauce Podcast, where we talk comics and comics culture. I am Henry Liu, and today I'm joined by Christian Diadamo. Christian, how's it going?
Hey, it's going well. Happy to be here.
Excellent. I'm also joined by Porfirio Rangel. Porfirio, how goes?
Doing good, Henry. It's freaking hot down here in SoCal. Even right now, as we're recording this late at night, it is like 80. But I'm happy to be here talking with you guys.
Excellent. Yeah, it's summertime. Today is July 14th, 2023. And today we're going to talk some animated movies. So, something we don't talk about too much on this podcast, but it's definitely something we all enjoy. And we have three of our favorites here to talk about. Um, yeah, I can name them right now. The three animated movies we're going to talk about today are Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, Batman Mask of the Phantasm, and Invader Zim Enter the Florpus. Three vastly different movies. So this should be a pretty interesting conversation. Yeah. Um, so with the animated movie theme today, kind of begs the question, why? Um, This is technically a comics podcast. Um, but right now, I think animated movies are in the general consciousness, right? Earlier in the year, we saw the Super Mario Brothers movie become a huge hit at the box office. We saw Across the Spider-Verse become a huge hit at the box office. So animated movies are kind of becoming the thing, right? Perhaps the future of Hollywood. Hollywood is kind of in disarray at the moment with the writer's strike and the actor's strike. And yeah, animated movies could be the wave of the future. Yeah. So I think it's a timely topic, and I think we got some good picks here. So we got three full feature-length movies to discuss. Let's get right into it. So earlier we were talking a little bit about what order should we cover these in, and the consensus was we should cover them in the order we would recommend watching them. If you had like a triple header animated movie night where you would watch these three, what order would you watch them? And yeah, the general feeling was that you would start with the more thoughtful, thought-provoking, artistic vision that is Pinocchio, and you would end with the wild adventure romp that is Invader Zim. Yeah. So we're gonna do just that. We're gonna do it in that order. So first up, Pinocchio. Just real quick, I thought I'd read the brief description of the movie from IMDb. It is described as a father's wish magically brings a wooden boy to life in Italy, giving him a chance to care for the child. And that is Pinocchio. And this one is Porfirio's pick. So, Porfirio, why don't you tell us why you chose this particular film?
Yeah, I think I've mentioned so many times in this podcast, it's no secret that my one of my favorite directors is Guillermo del Toro. And this movie is no exception. Like this movie came out on Netflix last year, December of 2022, and I instantly fell in love with this movie when I first watched it. I feel like it doesn't get enough uh like a lot of people haven't seen it, even though it's really good. And you guys hadn't seen it, so that's why I recommended it. And like you said, it's just a reimagination of the classic Pinocchio tale. But if you expect like a version where like we know like from the Disney one, it is totally different and you're not gonna get that.
Right.
Which is why I like this movie and recommended this one.
Excellent.
But
Excellent.
yeah, before I hear you guys' thoughts, like yeah, like you said, our three picks have three different animation styles. This Pinocchio was used slow motion,
Mhm.
um or
Or
what's the word?
stop motion. Yeah.
Stop motion. And so, that means like using like little clay figurines and just making a movie out of like using like small movements of each figure. And so there's a documentary special about behind the scenes to this film. I believe the film took about like, oh my gosh, don't quote me on this, but like 15 years to make or something like that.
Oh wow.
A- And that not from just the filming, but like just like getting everything like off the ground, production, script writing, all that kind of stuff. Um, but like you said, Henry, just different animation, and I feel like we don't see this kind of animation nowadays in movies. So that was another reason why I recommended it. So that was the one I gave you guys to watch, and you guys both watched it. And I want to hear your guys' thoughts.
Cool. So unlike our typical movie review format, we don't have to wait to the end to give our ratings. So why don't we just give the ratings kind of up front? What would you rate Pinocchio, Porfirio?
Oh, definitely a five. 5 out of 5. I thought it was very sweet and symbolic, and the storyline was good, the graphics were good. It was just like any like aspect of what makes a good movie is why I think this movie just knocked it out of the park. So 5 out of 5.
Excellent. I can go next. So yeah, with this format we do where like we have a movie that we kind of share to the rest, there's always a good chance that the recommender is going to have a higher rating than the people who he's sharing it with, right? Um, so that in mind, we shouldn't get all fired up if our picks get shot down a bit, right? And I'm not saying I'm gonna like piss all over Pinocchio. I'm just saying that I'm giving it a bit of a lower rating. I am recommending it. I'm giving it a 3-star rating. And yeah, here's my take. So yeah, I hadn't seen this before like a week ago or so, and really didn't know much of anything about it. So it was pretty interesting checking it out because this movie looks like nothing I've ever seen before. You were alluding to it, Porfirio, but the stop motion animation is really amazing. It's a beautiful movie to look at, no question. Um, I didn't even know it was stop motion till later, till after I saw the movie. I thought it was just really fucking good CGI, right? But then later I found out it was actual real stop motion, and it just made me appreciate it a lot because man, like the work that must have gone into it, just like incredible. So the look was on point, absolutely. Um, let's see, with the story. So I thought the movie started off a little bit slow, and I think a big reason was I don't know about you guys, but I found Pinocchio really annoying in the beginning of the movie, and like when I say beginning, like the first full act at least, he was really annoying, and I think he was purposefully annoying, but nevertheless annoying. And I was like not rooting for him, and like I couldn't really care less, could not care less about him. And I was just thinking, dude, like Geppetto should just chop this dude up for firewood or something. Like you got to get rid of this guy. Like he was destroying his house, and he was just like screwing up his life big time, right? Of course, the Pinocchio character did grow on me, and ultimately he makes this like big sacrifice at the end. Oh, we didn't give the spoiler alert earlier, so let's give that now. Spoiler alert for all three movies. So we'll get into plot points and whatnot. But yeah, Pinocchio makes this great sacrifice at the end where he essentially sacrifices his own immortality in order to save his father figure, Geppetto, who he loves dearly, right? And it's a very touching moment. No question, no question. So yeah, Pinocchio did start off annoying to me, but he did grow on me, and his character arc really was touching in the end, I thought. And yeah, it's interesting, Porfirio, you mentioned how you wanted to recommend this because it's a Guillermo del Toro movie, and I love his work too. So I'm glad I got to check this one out also. And I would add this, even though it's an animated movie, and it is, quite different from, say, Blade 2 or Shape of Water or Pacific Rim, you name it. It does still feel like a Del Toro movie, right? It has like the dark aesthetics. It has like these monster themes. Like Del Toro is notorious for always including monsters in his movies, right? So you're probably thinking, well, this is Pinocchio. How does a monster fit in, right? But in this movie, Pinocchio himself is the monster, right? So that's kind of a interesting twist. Whereas, like the original Disney animation, Pinocchio isn't a monster, right? But here he is. Like people are afraid of him, and I think you're kind of talking about this earlier, Porfirio, but it's kind of a real reaction. If there's a wooden puppet that came to life in real life, people would be fucking scared of it, right? They wouldn't be embracing it. They wouldn't think he's cute and cuddly and whatnot, right? So yeah, it's cool that Del Toro continues this like monster theme in his movies. Last little tidbit. I thought it was a little bit long. Like, a 2-hour movie by today's standards is not a long movie, but animated movies do tend to be a little shorter. For example, Mask of the Phantasm and Enter the Florpus are very short movies. This one did feel a little long. I I could have done without that whole like war sequence. Like it felt very like similar territory as that part where he had to do the puppet show. He was like trapped by like an overbearing boss doing a puppet show, and then he was trapped like doing like being a soldier in training and stuff. It just felt like the same thing, and I thought like like let's move on. So I felt they could have dropped that part. But otherwise, like I mentioned, I thought the movie ended pretty strong, and yeah, I think just on the look of it alone, this is a movie to behold. You got to see it. It's beautiful. Yeah, it's really like eye candy, right? So yeah, 3 out of 5 stars. How about you, Christian?
Yeah. So I think I'll also go with a 3 out of 5. I think I'm gonna echo a lot of I think Henry's sentiments that he said. Um all the way to start, how Pinocchio is a character that kind of like, yeah, you're like, all right, this guy's kind of annoying, especially when you spend time with Carlo, the perfect child at the beginning. I actually did like how they kind of started with that. You kind of see, you get really into Geppetto, and there's a lot more Geppetto in this movie. See what he loses, it's really sad. Um, and then kind of see where Pinocchio fits in later and how Pinocchio is a character. It's like like you could see Geppetto pulling his hair out, but towards the end, he grows on you just like Pinocchio probably grows on Geppetto, to where you really you are rooting for him at the end. And yeah, I just want to double down on the animation. The animation is one of a kind. It's something you really don't see anymore
Yeah.
with in the world of CGI that we have today. And so just the level of craftsmanship and the passion that Del Toro really put into this is just something to behold. I think that's worth the price of admission alone, is
Yeah.
really just watching this beautiful animation. And like um but I do also think, yeah, I wasn't as big of a fan of the Nazis. I think that I really liked them in the background at the beginning, how when Carlo dies, or how you just kind of randomly see throughout like the first and second act, um, like the occasional fascist Italy, and the World War II setting. But I think when they kind of really get to the Nazi camp, I did check out a bit. But I think the film does really turn around when they kind of get back to the whale. I also think, because I also kind of checked out because that's also the part that Geppetto's not there. I really like Geppetto in this
Mm.
movie, and he gets swallowed by the sea monster about halfway in, and then you just really don't see him until Pinocchio also gets swallowed by the sea monster. Um, let's see. I will say, like with the music, is that I did like the music. I'm not a real big musical person. I'm not really into musicals. I liked it. It's so hard though. Like I feel bad saying it's like a negative because I did like it, but because I think of the original um movie is so iconic, it's so well made. It's kind of one of Disney's like original masterpiece movies. Like it's like all I got to do is like the da 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 has kind of become the Disney theme, when you wish upon a star, because it's so iconic. And then I
Hmm.
could even like just say like a few like key words and you probably remember the tune, like give a little whistle and you could probably think of the song in your head because the music in the original is just it's so well done. And I don't think this one kind of reaches that level, but I think the voices are well done. I think in its own right, in its own world, it works, and I did really enjoy it. Um, and like I was really thinking about the Nazi section. Maybe I'll get your guys' 10 on this. Why they went for that instead of Pleasure Island, which is where the original went, where Pinocchio smokes cigars and turns into a donkey. And so I was looking around because I wasn't as into that. And I think the idea was that um the idea is like Pinocchio is always a story about morality. And I think the original is all about kind of like this like obedience, go to school, um, don't join the circus, and like kind of Pinocchio wants to forge his own path, but he kind of gets in with the wrong crowd. And that's why he starts telling lies, he starts smoking, he turns into a donkey, you know, because he hangs out with the wrong crowd and he didn't stay in school. He didn't listen to his dad. Whereas, excuse me, this one, Pinocchio still kind of does that, but with the presence of the Nazis in there, you know, they're evil. We don't like them. So, but I think with fascism, it's all about the idea of obedience and I think Pinocchio kind of becomes the real boy. He really kind of gains it by making his own decisions, but kind of from a more grounded, internal sense of morality rather than kind of what's being told to him from others. It's more of like an individual sense of morality is kind of what makes him the real boy rather than listening to Geppetto and go to school like the last one. Maybe I'm simplifying a little bit too much, but that's kind of what that's kind of how the take I've seen, and that's kind of once I thought of it, I think that made me kind of think about the movie a little more, maybe in a bit of a different way.
Well, I
But yeah,
I, I like that take, Christian. You could
mhm.
almost like teach a film class with that take on Pinocchio.
Yeah, like the two different versions of it. So there is a lot here, and there's a lot here to like. I can really see why you gave this a 5, and I think I can imagine. Well, I give this a 3 now on my first viewing, also kind of with the first one kind of in mind as I'm watching this one, and how much I loved that original version as a kid. I can imagine myself as an adult because this is like a very adult, dark kind of movie with the subject matter, not for kids. I can't imagine like maybe kids would like it, but this definitely looked like it was made for adults. But I can imagine myself coming back to this movie later and giving it a higher grade.
Very cool. Just
Yeah,
real quick, uh, my take on the whole fascism thing is much more simplified than your very
Mhm.
thought out film school version of it. But I think it's just Del Toro. He loves to shit on fascists in his movies.
Hmm.
It seems like a ton of his movies have like Nazis or Mussolini or whatever. So I think he just wanted to kind of continue those themes. Anyhow,
Mhm.
prefer you had some.
I just think it kind of just because it was really like evident like the whole like Nazism throughout the film. I mean, like the first opening scene, like his son is Carlo is killed because of the war, the bombing. Um, and then, Mussolini attends one of the puppet shows, and then again, like the only reason Pinocchio goes to school is because of the Nazi general who's like, oh, like he needs to learn discipline and it has to go there. So I just feel like it made sense for him to go to a Nazi camp, especially because this is Italy during World War II. Um, and like learn discipline. But I agree with the point that you made, Christian, about like Pinocchio is about like understanding morals and not giving to like because I think like one of the lines the general says is like, oh, Pinocchio's too much of an independent thinker, and we can't have that, you know. And so that's like the whole reason why Pinocchio stands up to him at the camp because he's like, oh, like, or even like helps like his son question that, like, why does war have to exist? Why this? Like, why can't we just like be together instead of having like this like survival of the fittest kind of mentality, you know?
Oh, I had a question for both of you, really. So I alluded to the fact that there's a moment where Pinocchio sacrifices his own immortality to save Geppetto, but at the end of the movie, it's not entirely clear, like his status in terms of his immortality, right? Do you think at the end of the movie, Pinocchio has indeed lost his immortality, or is he still immortal? I think it's kind of open ended, but I was curious what you guys think.
I
Um,
think I
go
think
for it.
Pinocchio I think Pinocchio lost his sense of immortality, but um he can't like he's not like a typical like flesh and bone kind of body but he's definitely like like wooden, so he can like live longer than like a human body.
Mm-hmm.
But he still has the ability to like be chopped up or burnt or shot or whatever, like how he dies throughout the movie.
Right.
uh
Christian.
Like, yeah, I was thinking it'd be like kind of like an elf from Lord of the Rings, where at the end, where if he dies and that's it. But he would live either an extended life or a very long life. As long as he didn't die, he would live forever.
Okay.
Mhm.
That
Yeah.
was, I guess, my take. Like, it didn't seem like he was really growing at the end, so he probably stayed in his singular body
Mhm.
Yeah.
and just
I agree with both of you. Like, it seemed like he wasn't aging at all at the end, right? But it did imply that if he was killed, he would not be resurrected like he had been throughout the movie, right? So, okay,
Mhm.
we're all on the same page there. All right.
What one thing I liked about the film, I think, like you had alluded this to, Henry, is like the monsters that Guillermo del Toro uses. Like,
Yeah.
like you said, where he's notorious for using monsters, and this was no exception. Like, there's no fairy godmother. There's like this like
Right.
creepy like spiritual celestial being who actually like makes um gives life to Pinocchio, and
Right.
then there's like a counter creature to that, which is like this like I don't know, I want to say like goddess of death kind of creature, you
Hmm.
know. And I feel like I think that's another like aspect of why I like the film is like there's like this very beautiful narrative of like life and death, like um that is immortality like all like promising as it's as people believe it to be and want to seek it, or is there like beauty in just like living life and then like finding peace at death, like yes, it's like the end, whatever, but there's also I think like what Guillermo del Toro wants to capture is like there's also beauty in it, because then you could like celebrate it and be able to like have like peace with it. And I think this is just like a common thing I feel like in a lot of his work, but the fact that it was using Pinocchio, like again, like of the story of like immortality and everything, I think it's just another like beautiful way to look at how the story of life, death, immortality is talked about.
Right on. Great take, Porfirio. And just to put a bow on it, the character you're referring to as being a goddess of death type character is voiced by none other than Kate Blanchett, who played Hela, the goddess of death, in Thor Ragnarok. How about that? Okay, so we do have two more movies to cover, so let's keep it moving. Our next movie is Batman, Mask of the Phantasm from 1993. So it is the 30th anniversary of this movie, so I'm glad we get to talk about it here right now. This one was Christian's pick. So Christian, why don't you tell us what you would rate this one and why you chose this particular film?
yeah. So yeah, Batman: Mask of the Phantasm. I'd say this is like the cult favorite Batman movie. Uh, we went to a panel of this during WonderCon, and a lot of people, even then around there, were talking about how this is still their favorite Batman movie after all these years, after all these iterations. Even with The Dark Knight, they still latch on to this animated movie from 1993. It really has a following, and it's the 30th anniversary. That's actually not why I picked it. I was just kind of rewatching a bunch of Justice League Unlimited lately as well. And it'd be also great to talk about Kevin Conroy, of course, rest in peace. The great Batman voice that I always hear in my head when I read. And so I guess I'll go a little bit more into my history of behind this movie and talk about it before I give my rating.
Sure.
So, like, I grew up watching Batman the Animated Series, especially when it came to Cartoon Network, kind of in the later 90s, early 2000s for reruns. And I would here's some great little nostalgia. I used to love picking up Batman movies from Blockbuster Video. And so I picked this one up as a kid, rented it on VHS,
Ooh, nice.
and watched as a kid. And to be honest, when I was a kid, I wasn't as into it. I loved the other Batman movies a lot more. The one where he fights Mr. Freeze, the one where he crosses over with Superman. Those had a little more action. But there was something about this movie that just kind of stayed with me. The movie was much more somber. There was a lot of romance. Robin wasn't in it. It felt like a much darker movie than I think I was expecting as a kid. Whereas the other ones, they had Robin, they had more action, they had the big villain plot. Whereas this one featured, and so this was a lot different. And so I remember not caring for it as much. I didn't really rewatch it nearly as much as the other ones. But it's something I kind of stuck in my mind, and I kind of came back to it over and over and over. Just every few years, I'd kind of get this weird inkling to watch it. I kind of just got a little craving for it to revisit it and come back to it. And every time I watched it, I liked it a little more and more and more and more over, over all these years. And so I think seeing it now, there's just kind of a level of appreciation I have for it. And it does also kind of remind me of all the great memories I had watching Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill and the crew growing up watching the Batman the Animated Series, like a hallmark of my childhood. So I'll let you guys kind of get into this movie a little more, but that's just kind of my personal history with it. I think like now it's like I really want, yeah, like I probably would say it's a 5 out of 5 for all this time. Even though the movie kind of gets older and shows more of its age, there's also you have a lot of nostalgia for it, and there's like a kind of a piece of you that you kind of see when you watch it. With a movie, you that kind of reminds me of those times. So yeah,
Awesome.
that's my take on Batman: Mask of the Phantasm. So what did you guys think of it seeing it now in 2023?
All right. Oh, real quick. Oh, Christian, you're giving it a 5, right? 5 out of 5.
Yeah, I'll give it a
Okay,
5. Yeah.
cool. Porfirio, what's your take on this movie?
Let's see. I feel like I have to give it a 4 out of 5. Um, I didn't grow up with Batman like you did, Christian. I watched the animated series here and there. I remember, yeah, like this popping up sometime when I was a kid, and I really didn't care for it either. And it wasn't until, yeah, like I was older that I watched it and I grew a little bit of appreciation, but rewatching it right now, like when for since you had recommended it to us, um it was really good. I understand, yeah, like why 30 years later this is still a lot of people's favorite Batman movie. um I think a lot of it is like the graphics, the animation is just, I feel like really fun and different than what you were seeing back in the 90s. Everything's so, you had like the X-Men bright cartoons and stuff, and this was very like just all black and red, and this just stands out. I love the, yeah, like the colors that they used. And I guess what also just really stuck out with me is just like the storyline again, like Batman kind of conflicting, like whether or not he wants to stay Batman, whether he wants to be with what's her name?
Andrea
Andrea,
Beaumont.
whether he wants to stay with her. And then he kind of like even conflicting about like whether or not, when is it enough to kind of decide to either be Batman or be with Andrea. He's always like going conflicting with back and forth with himself. And I think essentially that's like what makes Batman Batman is like he he's so like fucking stubborn, and he doesn't care about like the bruises to his body, or doesn't really care about like the people that are affected around him. As long as he's like doing the right thing, he's gonna keep doing it. And so essentially I think that's why I like this movie, just because it's Batman. You know, it's the root of what makes Batman so like why psychologists love having the psychology of Batman panels at Comic Cons, you know? And look no further than this movie. The only reason I give it like 1 star down is I guess like it's so complex and hard to understand as a kid, that's why maybe I feel like it goes over your head really fast. And maybe like I said, even because I didn't watch this until like a lot later, like even that still went over my head. So I feel like you have to watch this a few times to understand like what this film is actually trying to tell, you know? So I think that's the only reason why I give it stars, because you have to watch it a few times to like get like what the story writers are trying to grasp at with this Batman character. But other than that, it's a fucking awesome movie to check out. And whether you're a Marvel DC fan, fucking check out this movie. It's a really, really good.
Right on. And just devil's advocate to you, Porfirio. I would question, you mentioned, oh, the movie might be a little complicated for kids. Is this movie made for kids? Christian himself said as a kid he didn't really like the movie a whole lot, and it kind of grew on him as he got older. And I think a lot of the appeal of this movie is that it's more adult oriented than a lot of the animated stuff that was going on at the time, right? So just something to think about, right? Okay, so here, my take. Oh, I didn't read the little synopsis for this one, so let me read it now. From IMDb, Batman is wrongly implicated in a series of murders of mob bosses, actually done by a new vigilante assassin. So here we go. Batman, Mask of the Phantasm. So before I get into my rating and review, um, I, I do have a question for you, Christian. Like, as I was watching this movie, I was thinking, who the hell is Andrea Beaumont? I had never heard of this character. But here she is absolutely vital to the Batman character and origin. Um, has she ever appeared in comics? Is she in the animated series at all outside of this movie? Who is this
No.
character?
Um, Andrea Beaumont is pretty much only in this movie. She appears one other time that I can think of in all of like the DC animated universe. Her and the Phantasm. The Phantasm might have shown up in a comic. I've never seen Andrea or the Phantasm in a comic. I maybe outside of like there might be a panel you might find on the internet where they're around, but yeah, they were created for this movie. Um,
Oh,
just like because the animated series like to do that. They like to kind of create their own characters that would end up kind of taking a life of their own, like Harley Quinn. Or you could even just say Mr. Freeze because of how radically different he was at the time
mm-hmm.
before this movie came in, or before the Heart of Ice episode, I mean.
Got it. Oh, right on, right on. Thank you for that. Yeah, I was kind of blown away. Like, um, I was like, wow, this is a departure here, Porfirio, you're saying like this movie is like quintessential Batman, and it really is. It's in the vein of the Batman we know and love, but this movie kind of throws his origin story upside down, right? Like, never did I hear that, like, oh, Batman almost didn't become Batman because of this woman he was dating. Like, what? Like he like in this movie, according to this movie, he would not have become Batman if their relationship worked out, right? And that was a big curveball to me. So pretty interesting stuff. Okay, but the movie itself. So I'm gonna go with 3 stars. Yes, a recommendation. And kind of like with Pinocchio, definitely there's a lot I enjoyed about it. But there was also some stuff I had some issues with. Yeah, good stuff. Kevin Conroy, holy shit, like he is a badass voice for Batman. I did not watch the animated series. I had never seen this movie before, so I was completely new to Kevin Conroy, and I kind of know what the hype is all about now. He is great. He's a great voice for Bruce Wayne and certainly for Batman. And equally awesome, maybe even more awesome, is Mark Hamill as the Joker. Awesome, awesome, awesome. The laugh. Oh, his laugh as the Joker is just fucking amazing. So great. Um, okay, so we talked a little bit about how this is a little more adult oriented than you might expect. So I don't think I'm alone here, but it seems that it's implied that Joker fucks his robot assistant on the regular. Like that's like implied, right? I didn't misread that, did I? But I definitely laughed when that moment happened. Yeah, Mark Hamill's great. He's just he just like he goes all out. Like he's Luke Skywalker, but like whatever. I'm just gonna go like full Joker, and he just delivers. What else? Oh, so I enjoy the story too. I definitely enjoyed the story. Porfirio, you mentioned how it's a bit complicated, maybe too complicated for kids. I kind of dug that. Like, I was not expecting a lot of the twists that happened. Like, Christian, you saw this so long ago. Like, it's probably just a given to you now, all the plot twists. But, like, again, spoiler alert, when it is revealed that Andrea Beaumont is the Phantasm, I was like, whoa, what? I was definitely like surprised. I kind of felt stupid, but because I was like, oh, everyone knows that now, I bet. But I didn't know that. I was like legitimately surprised. So I enjoyed the complexity and all the plot twists. And okay, so okay, and what did I have a problem with? So I gotta say, this movie is older, right? I mean, it's 30 years old. It's the 30th anniversary. So I don't want to like shit on the animation too much. It's an old movie, right? But man, it was kind of hard to get through. And look, we all just watched Across the Spider-Verse. We just watched Pinocchio. Amazing visuals, right? So maybe maybe I'm just like I'm spoiled that way. And look, I'm an old school guy. I grew up with this stuff. I grew up watching G.I. Joe and Transformers, but I don't know. I just felt it was lacking. And again, I don't want to like shit on it too much, because my understanding was that this movie wasn't meant to be a theatrical release. Like, I guess it turned out to be, but it wasn't meant to be like outside of your little like 90s TV screen, right? That said, it just didn't look great. It looked dated, and maybe not so much the like the background visuals and like the Gotham City vibe. Like that was kind of cool. Like there's a minimalist thing going on. And like you're saying, Porfirio, kind of dark and not as like obnoxiously bright as like say X-Men, right? But the movements, like the character movements, it was hard to get around. It was I've been hearing what you had mentioned, Christian, how like for a lot of people this is like the best Batman movie ever. Period. Like counting the live action movies, counting the Nolan trilogy, all that stuff, right? And I'm just watching and I'm like, I don't know, man. The animation just kind of looks shitty to me. I gotta be honest. Gotta be honest. So I was not wowed. And I even tried to be like more objective about it. Like for the time, maybe it's kind of cool. But to put it in context, I was thinking, well, there are animated movies of the era, like for example, Transformers the movie and Akira. Those two movies preceded this one, right? Those were 80s movies. And to this day, both of those are like works of art. You could take a single cell and it's like frame it up. It's beautiful, right? I don't have that same opinion with this one. So it took away from my experience. And I feel like it's kind of a cheap shot to go this route, but it's my honest opinion. I felt the animation is a bit lacking here. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. I'm kind of rambling on here, but that's my take on Mask of the Phantasm.
Yeah, no, I I definitely get what you're saying, and I definitely noticed that, especially watching it this time, that I was like, ooh, that did not look good. I think certain fights look a little rough around the edges. Um, and I think whenever the movie has to do a lot of quick movements, it definitely struggles. I think there's definitely some shots I think still look pretty good when they really accentuate the moodiness of it. Like when you see kind of Batman come out of the shadows with his cape kind of draped over him and he's all blue. Or I think the movie does explosions really well for like, well, that's one thing I noticed is something I thought still looked pretty good was when they had explosions, especially at the very end of the movie when the amusement park blows up or the I thought that looked really good, but I think any sort of fight sequence, I was like, "Oh, I noticed that. That's aged." And I think because this was made for TV, it definitely looks like it belongs on TV.
Yeah.
It back in the 90s, whereas they probably didn't have they definitely didn't have the budget or the time to kind of give it that real theatrical look. Quite like something you'd see like I think Aladdin came out around the same time as well. But yeah, Aladdin, like Akira, especially when you look at those still hold up super well. Whereas
Yeah.
I think with this one, a lot of the heavy lifting is done by the voice acting and the music. I really like the music in this one. The like choral opening as you kind of go through Gotham City and a lot of the big music kind of really I think that's what really kind of makes everything pop more than the animation, especially watching it nowadays. I don't know.
Right on. Right on. Cool. Okay. Yeah. So we're gonna keep it moving, but if any ideas pop up along the way about Batman or Pinocchio or Zim, we can cover them at the end also. So there will be time to discuss everything if there are additional thoughts. For now, let's keep it moving. Next up, Invader Zim, Enter the Florpus. This movie was made in 2019. And here's the synopsis from IMDb. Zim discovers his almighty leaders never had any intention of coming to Earth, and he loses confidence in himself for the first time in his life, which is the big break his human nemesis, Dib, has been waiting for. Okay, so this one was my pick. And why did I choose the Invader Zim movie? Yeah, this is an interesting one. I had never seen the Invader Zim series. I had never read the Invader Zim comic book, and yet here I am recommending to the world this movie, which I do give 4 stars. And yeah, a little bit of background. So I am a parent. My son Simon is currently 9 years old, and as a lot of parents can attest to, I have been exposed to a lot of children's programming, and a lot of it, I dare say most of it, is really bad. And this is the parent life. You are exposed to a lot of shit that you would never have wanted to watch otherwise. you know, I've seen a lot more Paw Patrol and PJ Masks than I prefer. So what I'm saying is, there's a lot of pretty unwatchable children's programming out there. So through the years, I've always been trying to find stuff that like I can kind of tolerate, you know. So I think I mentioned when we did the Super Mario Brothers episode that I was sort of expecting that to be a shitty movie, and I would just have to sit through like more bad kids programming, right? But that was a big pleasant surprise. Simon and I both really liked that movie. So every once in a while, there's some gems in there. The Marvel stuff has been huge for me and Simon. We have a shared love for Marvel. Um, but most of it is pretty few and far between. And then I came across this movie, Invader Zim, Enter the Florpus, and I had no idea what it was. I came across it on Netflix, and I saw the little tile, and I saw like the art of it, and the artwork kind of drew me in. I was like, oh, this looks kind of cool. Put the trailer on, and I was like, whoa, this looks pretty bonkers. This is worth at least like starting, right? Started it up, and then both Simon and I watched it, and we laughed our asses off for the full time, which is a pretty short runtime. It clocks in at 71 minutes, but we were laughing our asses off the whole time. Why do I love this movie so much? I mean, yes, I think it's really funny, but I don't really know. It's a really strange movie. Um, I to this day, I'm a little baffled by why I'm connecting with this movie so much. It is like a kid's movie. Like I looked at the ratings, so just a little to give a little context. Pinocchio from 2022 is rated PG. Mask of the Phantasm, 1993, is rated PG. This one is rated TV Y7FV, which I'm not even sure what that is, but it's for kids, right? It is for kids. And yeah, why me as a middle-aged adult am I so like into this movie? Like I'm still kind of processing it myself. So like what I can't say is it's really funny. I really dig the animation style and the irreverence of it. I think maybe that's the key. The irreverence of this movie. This movie just kind of, I don't know, doesn't give a fuck. It just goes there. It's like a wild dream laid out in front of you. Hard for me to describe. Oh, let me tell you a little bit of the backstory of the movie. The Invader Zim TV series was canceled way back in 2002. So essentially, this movie was 17 years in the making, and I think that speaks to the cult status of this movie. Essentially, the fans kept this franchise alive. The interest was like always there because it had this like cult following. There was this thing called Invader Con, where it was like an actual Invader Zim convention that happened a few times, essentially between the series cancellation and before this movie. So yeah, I think that the cult status of it maybe helps describe my interest in the movie too, because yeah, I think it definitely falls under that like cult classic uh category. Um so okay, yeah, let me just finish with this. I part of it certainly is like uh my shared interest in Invader Zim with my son. I think, yeah, of course, there's a part of it because like we both enjoy it. Um, so that helps fuel both of our the fun factor for both of us, right? But you know, more than that, I think objectively, there's something else there, something else that I can't 100% put. Um, I can't place really, but all I can think of is that there are some things in this world that I connect with, and sometimes just inexplicably, I'm just drawn to it. One of my favorite movies of all time is Scott Pilgrim versus the World, and I remember after I watched that movie, I had a similar feel after watching this one. I just I knew I saw something that kind of gets me and is sort of for me. So that's my best description of this movie. This movie gets me, and I love it so much. And and just lastly, what happened after Scott Pilgrim? It was a similar thing. Or after I saw the Scott Pilgrim movie, I was like craving more Scott Pilgrim content. So I like snatched up those comics right after I saw that movie. Similarly, after I saw Enter the Florpus, I was like, what is this? I need to see more. And I have since been watching the series and reading the comics. So it's had that kind of effect on me. All right. So Porfirio, what's your take on this movie?
Let's see. I would probably give this movie a 4 out of 5. I think I grew up watching Invader Zim, the TV show, and it I don't know why. Like you said, it's a very like weird type of humor, kind of. It's so out there and so crazy. I don't know why as a kid I watched it, but there was just something about it that wasn't like anything else you saw on Nickelodeon, like SpongeBob or Rugrats or Wild Thornberries. This one was just like its own like unique like style and writing and animation. I feel like Invader Zim was just like ahead of its time for just doing shit that was outside of like this like normal box of what was acceptable for cartoons or whatever. Which is why I think it got canceled after 2 seasons, but then like still has like a major cult following like so many years later. I think like it just was ahead of its time. And so when the movie first came out, I was pretty fucking excited that they were gonna make a movie. Cause like I said, I grew up with it, and it's a it's a type of humor that if you're not instantly drawn to it, I don't think like it can warm up to you. It's either like you like it or you don't like it. I think. And so a lot of it, like going into this movie was like nostalgia, like, oh my gosh, Gurf and um the human dude. What's the little the
Oh,
his name
Dib,
is his name?
Dib,
Dib and
yeah.
yeah, Dib and his sister, and I was just remembering like how they acted and stuff. I was like, oh my gosh, this is like my childhood all over again. And like it was just funny as how like Zim thinking like, oh, like I'm like the mastermind of like taking over Earth, and it's just so bonkers and ridiculous all over. I feel like, yeah, this was just really funny. The only reason I guess I'm giving it like 1 star down is because I think, yeah, I know you said, Henry, that it was really short, like only like barely over an hour.
Yeah.
But I feel like this could have done as like just another episode, to be honest. Like another like 30-minute episode instead of a whole like movie. But you know what? I'll take what I could get after all these years. Like just reboot the Invaders Zim TV show. Like I'll be happy with that. But it was totally fun, like revisiting this nostalgia, like early 2000s feel. It was made me a little kid again, and it was cute.
Awesome. Okay, what about you, Christian?
Right. So, I also watched Invader Zim as a kid. I was there when it premiered. I remember what I was. It premiered in 2001, so I was 9 years old at the time
Oh,
when I first started
so
watching
cool.
Invader Zim. And I remember it was like there was this like it was Invader Zim, and then the Fairly Odd Parents would be after.
Oh
It
yeah.
might have been reversed, but I always remember watching those two together. They always showed back to back. And like when I was a kid, I loved Invader Sim. I was a big fan. I watched every episode of that original run. I even had to look back and double check, and it's like, oh wow, I remember that. I remember that. I remember that. Like, I loved it as a kid. Um, Back when I was 9, 10, like it was definitely nothing like I'd ever seen at the time. I think the way it blended sci-fi, like comedy, horror, and the fact that it like a lot of it kind of turned everything kind of to 11, you know? Everything was like it was like the comedy was given like this big sugar rush. And so I loved it as a kid. I was a big fan. And I think and of course it gets canceled in 2002. They would play reruns, but of course, when you're that age, you kind of you go on to the next thing very easily. And so Invader Zim did drop out a bit of my mind a bit until I kind of but I would kind of revisit it every so often and come back to it because I have good memories of it as a kid. But unfortunately, I gotta say that like each time I would revisit Invader Zim, I would like it a little less. I think it's something that got me when I was a kid. Um, I think the way in Charm, the what you were talking about, Henry, how there's something about it, the way everything kind of just comes together. You feel like it just gets you. It just kind of hits a certain funny bone that uh like really comes together. And each time I would watch it, I think that it would just hit that funny bone a little less and less. I think that the elements wouldn't come together the same way for me. I think and it kind of would get a little more grating. The humor, like I said, the humor is very turned up to 11, and it's always so in your face with its jokes. It's like, it feels like you get hit with like a new joke or a new reference like every like second or half second. Um, and so I watched this. This is probably the second time I've seen this movie. I watched it once during COVID when I was kind of in a I just for some reason really decided to kind of go back to a lot of kid stuff that I liked, and this was one of them. And I think, unfortunately, I think that watching the second time, it's like I think I am reminded of like, oh yeah, this is why I'm not as big of a fan of this anymore. Unfortunately, I do got to give this movie a 2 out of 5. Um, but I think remember there was a time in my life when I probably would have given a 5. I think that I will say starting off, the animation is pretty amazing in this too. I really like the way they use the 2D animation, and I think a lot of the shots like look really really good when they have to go to a space section. There's a lot of movement that I think captures a lot of the humor like really well, and a lot of what makes Invader Zim is kind of heightened in Enter the Florpus. And the film, like once it starts, it just never stops. And but I will say like the humor it involves a lot of screaming. I think characters are always yelling, "I'm talking like this." You know, they're always way over enunciating what they have to say, you know?
Mhm.
And I think like that was like, oh God, oh man, you know what? Like after a while of it, you know, it feels like it throws out something random a lot of the time. You know, why is Zim so obsessed with pudding and pudding, you know, giving Dib his right kind of pudding, you know? Like you have a lot of little moments like that um in the movie. Why is Minnie Moose the crutch of everything, you know? And so there's a lot of little and so there's some moments that, you know, I will say there are some pretty good genuine laughs that I got from this movie. I will say it's almost like every like one out of every 10th joke landed for me. But even then, because it's like, oh, that's like one joke every 10 seconds, you know? So it felt like not a lot landed, but it's still like kind of weirdly consistent because of how quick and snappy everything was. Um, like I do really like Gaz. I think she's a great character because she's probably the most down to earth out of everybody,
Right.
and I think provides a real nice contrast to Dib, who's like very very over the top, you know. Um, and I think I got a really good laugh out of her just like playing guitar during one of the big montages of Dib like working out, training.
Yes.
I thought that was great. There's always like a little visual gag that gets me. Um, but like I said, I have a lot of very conflicting feelings about Invader Zim as a whole. As someone who's kind of been watching it, um, but that's just kind of I guess like you can kind of see how I've kind of changed over time over watching this kind of and like coming back to it. I never really read the comics, um, but that is a I think because I kept having the diminishing returns, I never really went to that. So maybe without the auditory and the over enunciation that I kind of found a bit grating, maybe that would be a better avenue in a way, you know. But at the same time, that like I think you guys were also getting to a lot of it with like the way it kind of gets you. It's almost like for you guys, it's really greater than the sum of its parts. There's like a sense of charm to it that is very infectious, you know. Charm while also like kind of a grossness. You know, the way it depicts Earth is super gross and like people are like brain dead in this, you know,
Mm-hmm.
in the world of Invader Zim. Like people are so unbelievably stupid. And so
Yeah.
there's like it feels like there's a bit of satire to it, you know. And so there is I do see why the cult of Invader Zim exists. I see why there was a ZimCon. And you know, even though it's not for me, I can't help but kind of root for it, you know. So 2 out of 5, but I guess I'll leave it at that. That's my little take on Invader Zim as a whole, really.
Very nice. Very good, honest take, Christian. And I get it. Like I was almost expecting a take along these lines from one of you because um it does feel like this movie and yeah, the show as well is really like either you get it or you don't. And it's just sort of like it it can differ from one person to another,
Mhm.
or like you're saying, uh, one person at a certain age versus that same person at a different age, you
Mhm.
know. So I mean that's why I'm really uh surprised that I'm really drawn to this because you know this movie is a Nickelodeon creation, and you know it was created with like kind of an edgy cult thing in mind, but ultimately it was meant for like I don't know, like a 5 to 15-year-old boy demographic essentially. So yeah, it makes sense that you know as a 9-year-old boy you were loving it, Christian. But why am I digging this so much right now? Like, yeah, I mean, part of it, yeah, like I said, is my own son's interested in it. But there's definitely objectively something I'm drawn to here, and that fascinates me. And even on your end, Porfirio, like you're saying you're enjoying it from a nostalgia angle. So I get that too, of course. But yeah, I continue to be surprised at myself for being drawn in so much here. I did have just a couple other thoughts here. With my rave review of this movie, like the question might be why not a 5. I do view this movie as a bit of a, I don't know, guilty pleasure, empty calories sort of thing. Like, this is kids programming, but don't get it twisted. Like, I don't necessarily advocate like having your kid watch this show, because it's not like they're gonna learn some great life lesson. Like, that's not Invader Zim, is it? Invader Zim is gross, and it's like, I almost look at it as like a young boy's brain just exploded onto a TV screen. Like, there are robots and aliens and farts and poop, and just like there's so much in Invader Zim that a a young boy is thinking about all the time, right? Like, um Invader Zim's leaders are the almighty tallest, right? So interestingly, Simon had a phase. He's still kind of in that phase, but he's obsessed with people's heights. So if you're really tall, like, he is like just sort of in awe of people who are tall. So he's always asking, like, oh, how tall are you? Just going up to random strangers, asking them, how tall are you? So this is like stuff that is on young boys' minds, right? So there's something pretty interesting there. And last little bit, like, Christian, you were talking about how like everyone's talking really loud, and I agree. There's a lot of yelling in this movie, and there's just a lot of the stuff in this movie that normally I'd be like, what is this? Like, this is this is kind of like the hallmark of a bad movie. Like, everyone's yelling and it's loud and it's all over the place. Like, another thing along those lines is like the first act of this movie, essentially nothing happens, right? Invader Zim returns to Earth, and he like lays out his like master plan to Dib, who is like connected to his chair, I guess, a chair Dib. Very weird. But Zim was like, phase 1 of my plan was just to wait. And it worked, because now you're like all out of shape and you're stuck to your chair, right? And he was just sitting in his toilet for like who knows how long, maybe years, right? And then he's like, and then phase 2. And then he can't remember what phase 2 was. And while he can't remember, Dib like gets back into shape. So like the first full act of this movie, literally nothing happens. There is no forward moving of the narrative, just nothing. And like, sometimes we dissect, what makes for good movies and what doesn't, good screenwriting, bad screenwriting. And this is kind of a sign of like a bad script, like the first act of a movie where nothing happens. How does that work? And inexplicably, for some, I guess, this movie does work, and it is just a wild ride. So that's Invader Zim. So we can get to wrapping up. Maybe we can just talk about all 3 of these movies as a whole, and I don't know, just some parting comments, thoughts as we wind things down here.
I guess I'll start because I seem to have like noticed a theme in each one of things I've said about how these movies meant something different to me, or these franchises, Pinocchio, Invaders, and Batman, all meant something to me at a certain age. I'm coming back to them as an adult. Um, my 30s and then thinking about how I might think of them later. I think Masculine Phantasm, the movie I picked, was something I really didn't care for much as a kid, but now I really like it, you know? And I think I come back to this a lot. I love animation, and so I there's something about I think the quality of animation, the fact that it's not quite it's not like live action, so there's a lot of your own kind of personal meaning that you ascribe to it. There's a bit of yourself you like imprint on animation more so than live action, you know, because not all it's not real. It's there's a lot of style to it. There's a lot of style injected into it. And so these all of these have left like an impression on me, and I definitely remember a time watching Pinocchio as a kid. I remember watching these movies, you know, now of course, but and I think these are all something I'm probably going to end up looking back on and revisiting later because that's just the power of animation. It just kind of imprints on you in a very different way. And who knows, maybe I'll think very different of all three of these years from now. And so it's kind of like a part with you that you grow up with, but you never really grow up with because it's always with you.
Well said. I like that. I like that a lot. And I had thoughts along the same line. And that's, with animation, yeah, there is, I don't know, a slightly more personal feel to it. With live action, you know, I think there's a bit of separation. You see like a real person playing a character, a whole bunch of real people playing characters. So I think there's a bit of a divide there. But when you're watching animation, in particular animation that you're connecting with, um, there's like I think there's a closer bond, right? Because there isn't like a real person you're looking at, or like I don't know, you can't feel like, oh, I'm like that character, because well, that's just an actor and he's just playing a role. It's not real, and that person's not me, right? But I think it's less of a jump when you're looking at like an animated character, and you're feeling like, oh, I can, identify with this character more, or just have more of like a personal journey. And I feel like with these movies, yeah, I can feel it. Like all three of us connected in different ways with these movies, and I think the animation aspect is a big part of that. Any last thoughts, Porfirio?
Yeah, I just want to say really fast, like I really love that we all chose like three different animation styles.
Yes.
Like mine was stop motion, Christian's was like a very like dark setting environment, and then yours is like just totally like 2D, like bright kind of colors. And it's one thing to see it as a kid and just like and enjoy this as cartoons, but I feel like as you grow more mature, you kind of appreciate like these different types of forms of animations, like that there's not like one set style or like correct style doing animation. Um, like you said, like Henry, I think like at the beginning of the episode, like two of the biggest animation movies are Mario and Across the Spider-Verse, and those are like two different like animation films as well, even compared to these ones,
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I just love that there's like this like so like array of animation films that we can watch and appreciate. And I think that's why like generally like I like gravitated to a different like appreciation to each of these three, you know. Like it's one thing to say like, oh, the music is good, the storyline is good, but then also to say like whether or not the animation is good is like that's a whole nother like aspect that I think is really beautiful, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point too. Like, animation is an art form in itself, right? So yeah, yet another aspect of a movie you can really appreciate. Okay. Hey, so I did have a comics pick related here, so I'm gonna give it right now. Invader Zim. So I had mentioned I am reading Invader Zim comics right now, and this is pretty cool because with the Invader Zim movie, the Invader Zim TV series, and the Invader Zim comics, they all are the same look, feel, and vibe. So if you do love the movie, I recommend the show and the comics too. So let's see. There was a 50 issue run of Invader Zim comics. I haven't read them all, but I have gone through the first, I think, 16 issues or so, and they're all great. Particularly like the first few. So my recommendation is volume 1, the first trade, issues 1 through 5. And there's a reason why the show, the movie, and the comics all kind of feel the same. It's because the creator of Zim, Jonan Vasquez, is involved in all 3. He, among others, is a writer of the comics. And for these first 5 issues, illustrator is Aaron Alexovich. Really cool art, just like the show and just like the movie. And yeah, it has the same irreverent humor and same insanity that we saw in Enter the Florpus. And I will add too that this first volume of Zim is actually what the movie was adapted from, essentially. The comics run starts with kind of what I was talking about earlier, the chair dib and Zim's phase 1 and all that. So it's kind of cool. You can actually see the origins of the movie. Like, so those early comics, the early issues of the comics were adapted into the movie. So yeah, if you like the movie, then I highly recommend comics, especially these early issues. Yeah, so check it out. And with that, we can wrap up the episode. This is farewell from Henry, Christian, and Porfirio.